You should totally clap for that. That was awesome. You are awesome. Thanks for being here again. What a great time of celebrating Christmas and worship and who God is and what Jesus has done. And that's the season we're in. We call it Advent. We call it all sorts of things. And the thing that I don't understand is this word Advent. And we're going to start with a little bit of review of last week. But I want to make sure we're all kind of working the same direction. This idea of Advent is being attached to so many different things. I mentioned last week, if you were here, if you Google Advent calendar, and you just put that in Google, all sorts of things come up. Your Advent wine calendar for every, and it's like, well, that's not really the reason of the season. I went to Amazon, right, where you went for Black Friday and Cyber Monday's coming up, and you're going to buy something on Amazon. I know you will, and I will too this next few weeks. And I put in Advent in Amazon, and this was one of the first things that came up, the Star Wars Advent Lego set. Who thinks that's awesome? Just don't be shy. Like the guys upstairs, of course they think it's awesome, right? Like every child and grown man wants this. And here's what's cool about this Lego Advent series is there's Harry Potter, there's a whole bunch of different ones, and whichever flavor of, sci-fi or fantasy world you want, they've got a Lego Advent set for you. We just got to be honest though, friends. There's nothing wrong with this. Well, unless you have like every single one of them, then that would be weird. But, right, this is fun. And you might even go, wow, that's a great idea. I'm like shopping right now on my phone. I'm getting ahead of the crowds. This is cool. But we just have to be honest. Advent is not about Star Wars, pop out little holes, and every day you open up a new one. And that's not what Advent is. And we're attaching this word Advent to so many different things. And that's okay. Like, I'm not here to judge that. I just want to make sure we're all looking at what the most important thing is that Advent is just this. It's the coming of Jesus. Advent is this description, this celebration that as followers of Jesus, that we celebrate the coming or the second coming. You look forward to it. The word in Latin literally means the coming. The coming of Jesus. The coming of Christ, Messiah. The one we've been waiting on. In Luke's gospel, last week what we talked about is that we found the events of Advent, the very familiar passage that many of us have heard, even if we're not following Jesus. I mean, even Charlie Brown has been reciting it to us every year in his Christmas special. Then in the year of Caesar Augustus, and this whole story, we find the events of Advent described in Luke's gospel, his biography of Jesus. But very important also is John's theology of Advent. In John's gospel, his eyewitness biography of Jesus, he goes and tells you, here's the difference that Jesus' coming makes. In John 1:14, it says, the Word, Jesus, the Word of God became flesh and dwelt among us. In some paraphrases of the Bible, it says, and God became flesh and moved into the neighborhood. That's the theology of Advent. That's what we talked about last week. And we said this, that the message of Advent, both the event and the theology, you put them together, and what you see clearly over and over again is that the separation between God and man, the separation between God and us, is over. He has indeed come. And that is what we call Advent. And we can attach it to all sorts of things, and that's fine. But we have to remember what is really going on. And not just this season, but especially this season, we put our mind towards these events. And then we talked about last week at the very end, we said, what part do we play in that? Is that just something that's happened? It's a fact? We move on? Or is there a role that we get to play? Do we participate in Advent in any way? And I just suggested 3 ways, maybe, and there could be a lot more. One way we can participate in Advent is helping other people with their separation with God. And could that come in the form of inviting them to join us? To be a part of a weekend service, to be a part of what we're going to do at Christmas Eve, and all the things that happen, all the pieces of generosity or angel tree or bell ringing. All of these are ways and just platforms we can invite people to join us. And we talked about practicing generosity. It's the second way that we can participate in Advent. That's what this push to really finish the corner is about in ministering to college students, meeting them where they are. This season of generosity is when we take care of next year's budget for benevolence and for people in need and our community partners and initiatives, the things we support. And generosity is a very practical way that we participate in Advent, in closing the gap between God and people. And then third is that for some of us, it's just time. Is this the season to accept the gift of Christmas for ourselves? That we still are choosing separation between us and God. And for some of us, this is the time to choose to open the gift of Christmas that God has given us in Jesus. So these are the ways that we can participate in Advent this year, every year. And today I want us to really kind of turn towards what difference does that make? Does it really still make any difference today that Jesus has come? Does it feel like sometimes that the world has moved on from that? That Advent is just another time that we spend money that we really don't have to buy things for people we really don't like and hang out with folks that we would never choose to be hanging out with, but we have to. They're our family. Maybe that's just too much. No, that's not me. I'm just kidding. What if Advent really impacted everyday places and times? See this series, I want to show you this picture. This series, we have these graphics, and maybe you've seen this, it's on our website, it's on the website flagstaff.christmas. And we've been using this image in our advertising to people who aren't a part of our church through social media and different places around town. And I want to explain it to you briefly because I think it's so important to understand that what we want to just think about is in the different places we experience life, Jesus has come. Last week, that's what we did at the very beginning. It goes from left to right. As you would expect, we said, Jesus is here. Christ is here. That's what Advent means. And we just introduced this idea. But today, we're talking about the second panel. Christ is here in the valley. And I'm going to explain what that means. But as you walk through the valleys of life, Jesus is with you. God is there with us. And then Christ is here in the garden. And next week's going to be so much fun. Our kids ministry, the kids from the Junction are going to come over and help us sing Christmas songs. And if that doesn't just make your heart already warm, then we need to have a conversation. You have you don't have a heart. Like, we need to talk about that. Like, I'm the Grinch. You can't be the Grinch too. Like, it's so exciting to see our kids sing. And if you have kids, bring their aunts and uncles. And it's an easy way to invite them. And we're going to talk about what it means that Jesus is with us in the garden, and that the beginning of the Bible is a story in a garden. The end of the Bible is a story in a garden. And Jesus is with us in the middle of his life. He spent time asking God to change the direction of things in a garden. And that relates to us. We're going to talk about what that means. And we say, in the storm, you go through storms, I go through storms. I was in Phoenix. I got a national weather alert at 4 a.m. of a tornado nearby to take cover 2 days ago. We live in storms, and it's not about tornadoes. Our talk in a few weeks. But you spiritually live in storms. You relationally live in storms. How do you navigate that? And how does Jesus walk through that? And then at Christmas, the very last weekend, he's here with us always. And that infinity sign is so powerful because it only can show just a glimmer of God who is always with us. And today we're going to talk about that he is with us in the valleys because we walk through valleys. David, one of God's most amazing followers and leaders in the Psalm, in a book of Hebrew poetry, writes about a valley. And the time he was in a valley, it's very familiar. In the NIV, it says, "The Lord is my shepherd. I lack nothing. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He guides me. Even though I walk through the darkest valley, the valley of the shadow of death," it says in the King James. Look at this poem about God being with you and I in the valley from the Message translation of the Bible. Look how it's said here. "God, my shepherd, I don't need a thing. You have bedded me down in lush meadows. You find me quiet pools to drink from. True to your word, you let me catch my breath." Let's just think about that for a second in this busyness. Just take a breath. God, you let us catch our breath. You send me in the right direction. Even when the way goes through Death Valley, I'm not afraid when you walk at my side. Your trusty shepherd's crook makes me feel secure. You serve me a 6-course dinner right in front of my enemies. Oh, that sounds Hopefully not like Thursday, but it sounds awesome. God is taking care of us. David says, you revive my drooping head. My cup brims with blessing. Your beauty and love chase after me every day of my life. I'm back home in the house of God for the rest of my life. When you and I walk through the valleys like David, like so many others, this imagery comes over and over again. That God is our shepherd. That wherever we go, he is with us. He's protecting us. He's guiding us. Jesus says the exact same thing about himself. In John chapter 10, look at this. He says this, I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. You and I walk even on Thanksgiving weekends and Christmas holidays to come. We walk through valleys. We wander sometimes in the wilderness, and God uses this imagery over and over again of a shepherd to describe himself through the psalm. And now Jesus using that same imagery. Here's what's just so amazing. When we read Luke last week, the shepherds near Bethlehem are such an integral part of this story. And history tells us very clearly that they're the least likely people to be a part of this story. They're the least likely profession for God to identify himself with. For Jesus to claim to be a shepherd would have been like, what? God is a good shepherd and earthly shepherds are knuckleheads. When Jesus said what he said, recorded by John, his friend. You see the characters and the images you and I find in our Bibles and these stories, these biographies and these historical accounts. The least likely people are the ones used by Jesus. Later, John is a fisherman. Very unlikely person to follow a rabbi and become a leader in a worldwide movement of change. Fishermen, tax collectors, political zealots. These are all the people who follow Jesus, who he chose to follow him. Very unlikely. They're not the esteemed members of their culture. That God even chooses the picture of a shepherd. We have this romanticized view of it, and God is the good shepherd. And most shepherds were scoundrels. And God chooses that, and he chooses us. Can you relate to the idea that God uses the unlikely? That in the unlikely moments of your life that we call these valleys, he walks beside you. Does that seem hard to grasp? It is for me. I think about the family, my family of origin, my nuclear family, whatever, my parents, my siblings, my grandparents, my aunts and uncles. I mean, if we were to sit and talk about all these people, they're beautiful, wonderful people, but they're very challenged people. Their history of mental illness, of addiction. There are people who are emotionally challenging, like your family. There's people full of drama, and I participate right there with them. Having my own hang-ups and insecurities and things I'm not proud of. And I look at my life, I look at where I come from and go, that's not the type of story God uses, except that it is. It's not the one I think he uses, because I walk in these valleys, and the impact they have is real. And I realize in my life that if I was going to really just have any chance of breaking out of some of these patterns and generational things that I had to perform. I had to impress people. I had to use what I had, things like my humor and my quick wit, to distract people from the real insecurities, from the real challenges, the real valleys that I found myself in. And you have those valleys too. Sometimes they're event-driven. A spouse passes away too soon. We've lost a child. A financial decision or our financial habits, honestly, are putting us on the brink. A diagnosis. Someone who's their last service. They're waiting for a diagnosis. And maybe that's you too. A relationship is ending. Or you wish it would end. But you just don't have the opportunity. It's too painful to end. You find out your child has special needs or uniquenesses that just changed your dreams for them suddenly. change your life, or a child rebels or won't speak to you. We have valleys that come from these events. But we also have valleys we walk through, some of us, because other people have chosen to harm us. We've been abused, we've been neglected, abandoned, we've just been hurt and wronged. We have valleys that come from our own addictions, our own challenges, our hang-ups, our own mental illness, a struggle with depression or insecurity, pride, stubbornness. Why does this happen? And why are you talking about it on a nice holiday weekend, Chris? Like, I was happy when I got here. We all walk through valleys. If you're not in one now, you will be. You have been. Why? Why do we have to walk through valleys? Isn't life, especially life with Jesus, supposed to be happy and joyous and always winning? Well, you can find that message, but it's not in here. We walk through valleys. We even walk through Death Valley. Every day, one of us is. And I can answer the question why. Jesus answered the question why. He said it here, just a verse before. He said he was the good shepherd. He says the thief comes only to steal, kill, and destroy. You ever wonder why sheep need a shepherd? You ever thought about what would happen to sheep if they didn't have a shepherd? They didn't have someone to get rid of the predators. They don't go so well. And it's true for us. See, in this world, there is an enemy. And Jesus uses this title, the thief, because he's using this picture of a shepherd and sheep and someone who come to harm the flock. And this is why we have valleys. And I know you don't want to talk about them, especially this weekend. Because some of us, this is the weekend that's the hardest. This is our valley. But do you really want to go through another Advent season pretending everything is okay? I don't. And I also have this bad habit I'm becoming more and more aware of in my maturity, supposed maturity, that I interrupt people. And actually, I've interrupted Jesus in this verse. Look at the rest of it. The thief comes, but he says, I have come. Jesus, the good shepherd, he has come that they may have life and have it. What's it say? Say it with me. To the full. That's awesome. Yeah, you're going to walk through a valley. Anyone who tells you you shouldn't is lying. Because there is an enemy, there is a thief, but there is a good shepherd. And he has come. He is everything we need. And doesn't that describe the life you want? Life to the full? Life with Jesus, who is the good shepherd. He gives us that opportunity, and even when we walk through valleys, he walks through it with us. Because the separation of God and every single one of us is over. Even when we walk through the valleys of this life. And I emphasize this so much because I know from very personal experience that it's in those valleys you feel the most separated from God. And I think there are things you and I can do to feel that connection with Jesus, to feel Advent, that Jesus has come when you feel like it's gone, when you're in those valleys. And you may not be in one now, but write this down, save the notes from the app. You're going to need this because I have to come back to it often myself. These are just the things I do. That when I don't feel the shepherd near me, when I feel alone in the valley. The first one is this, and it may not make sense at first, but I think it will. The first is you have to change your mind. You have to renew your mind. Paul says, one of Jesus' first followers who went through the darkest valleys, some horrific things happened to him. He says this in Romans 12:2. Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Renew your mind. You can change the way you think. In fact, here's what's crazy that I don't know if Paul knew this, but what you and I can know and what is actually true fact, you can change your brain. The chemistry and wiring of your brain is changeable. It can be renewed, just as he suggests, actually commands the followers of Jesus to do. Science has proven it over and over again. There's hundreds of studies have been done. The way that you fix your brain, two things have been identified more than anything else to make your mental outlook of life better is to express gratitude and to do things for other people. You're like, oh, I didn't want to hear that. I want to read a book, or actually maybe an article. That's easier. I want to listen to a blog. I want to take a pill. Those things are all fine. One way that science is proving you can fix your brain of all the darkness that can reside in us, and anxiety and depression and the greatest change the social sciences are finding is when you do things for other people and you express gratitude. A week ago, before Thanksgiving, I found myself totally in a week of drama. I mean, it's just one of those, like, I was in a conflict with a person I never had a conflict really with, and it was bothering me, and I was so consumed with it. Friday afternoon, I had this appointment on my calendar to go volunteer, you're going to love this, at the craft fair at NAU. Yep. I don't know how this happened, but through the United Way, I went there, and I was taking people's donation entry fee as a fundraiser, $2 to get into the craft fair, and that's a fundraiser for the United Way. And I and my new friend Avery, who's a young gal at NAU, who's from Ahwatukee, I found out, sat at a table for 2 hours. We were both volunteering, taking people's $2. Or poor students who didn't have $2 cash, instead of making them dig for coins in their backpack, we let them in. And you know what I realized? I was thinking back, I was actually journaling a couple days later, and I realized that the moment my week changed was when I walked in to the field house at NAU and volunteered and just helped another group, another organization that it benefited me zero. I bothered Avery for 2 hours, asked her all kinds of questions like a dad about living in a dorm. It was awesome. And my week changed. The conflict is still there, but I don't actually care about it anymore. Because science is right. When you do something for someone else, you get your mind off yourself. What if 2020 was the year? It's coming. December's tomorrow. 2020 is in 2 minutes after that. What if that was the year you said, I'm gonna help somewhere? I'm on the list to serve in kids ministry. I've been through the process, but I don't ever show up. What if you did next year? Or you got on the list, or you came on Sunday nights and helped with the students that are here, or you got involved in the ministry at NAU. How do you want to renew your mind? I would say this could be the year you do it, coming. Second, the way that I find the presence of Jesus in the valleys is that I talk to a trusted friend. You got to find someone who you can trust, who follows Jesus as well. You have lots of friends. I have lots of friends who don't follow Jesus. I have lots of friends who do, and there's this really small group of people. They're not really a group. They're just people that I connect with in different ways. And I share things with them. And it helps me find Jesus in the valleys. Because here's what we think. Here's what the enemy, the thief, tells us is you can't tell anyone what's going on. And what I've found over and over, every single time that I keep what's wrong inside, it makes me feel alone. Weird. When I don't share things with people I trust, when I'm not authentic and vulnerable, I feel more alone because I made myself more alone. And you're the exact same way. Next time you're in a valley, share it with a trusted friend. You don't need to put it on Facebook or whatever social media you use. You can. But you can't trust everybody out there. But do you have a person? Sometimes it's just one person. It's two people. Maybe it is a group that gets together, but when I talk to those people, they don't even always give me good advice. Sometimes the advice they give me is horrible. Sometimes they say the exact wrong cliche, because that's what we're going to say to each other. But it makes me more aware that Jesus has come, that he is near, not far. The separation is over. And third is this: I would encourage you to make communion both sacred and weekly. You see, when Jesus came, Advent, Christmas, he gave us communion. The Lord's Supper, the Eucharist, whatever name you, crackers and juice. It was bread and wine, but he gave it to us. And is it routine? Is it occasional? What if it could be sacred and weekly? So many of us have found that prioritizing just this time together, this gathering, that includes when we gather communion every single time. When we prioritize it, I know the presence of Jesus in the valleys is more real. It's more relatable. And communion is also the promise that he will come again. Advent, he has come. And he is coming again. Jesus is the one who said that when we celebrate communion, Paul said, when we celebrate communion, we declare the coming of Jesus again. What if your goal this year was to gather more often with other Jesus followers, whether it's here at our church, you find another place, another form to participate in communion? What if you just weren't here when it was convenient, but every week? John 10:11, it's Jesus who said this: I am the good shepherd. And the good shepherd lays down his life for his sheep. As the ushers come and they pass these trays and there is bread and there's a cup of juice, I just want to leave this verse on the screen. I want you to think about the truth that this is what Jesus says about himself. You're going to go through a valley, and the shepherd has laid down his life for you. You don't walk through that valley alone. And communion reminds us of those events. So as the trays pass and we have just a moment of quiet, would you just take this time to make communion sacred again? To be quiet with your shepherd. Spend time talking or praying or just silent. And then I'll lead us through the taking of these elements together.